Well, Joey Dolan, welcome to episode 8 of the Southreport. You've actually been highly requested. I think it's because of football season, not because of the bloke you are. So we're coming in for our interview. But the most pressing question I have for you as a absolute Raiders tragic and Arsenal tragic. It's been a very long, hard 20 or 30 years for me. Who wins the English Premier League this year?
Well, considering everything that you've just said, it would be terrible.
Please say Arsenal. No, who wins?
I think they win it tomorrow because
Do you?
I think Man City will drop points.
Okay.
Palace are just such a hard team to beat,
Yeah.
and they're preparing for a European final.
I said that about Everton as well, and at 3-1, I thought I was right. Anything can happen in a game of football. So, look, thank you for joining the game. That was very selfish of me to go straight to my English Premier League team. We're going to talk all things football, but the beauty of a podcast is actually learning a little bit about people's upbringing and their life. So let's go all the way back to the start. Where were you born?
I was born in North London, a hospital called Northwick Park. So my parents were from Northern Ireland, and Mum was a Protestant, Dad was a Catholic. So that wasn't a very wise decision in Belfast.
Yeah, that's.
How do you know how far we got?
I keep an eye on the time all the time. I keep track of it just in case it ever stops. And if my phone rang, and that's why I looked at it, and bang, it's just stopped.
So it normally carries on recording, even though.
So born in the UK, Northern Irish parents.
Northern Irish parents, yeah. And we went to primary school in North London, but then my dad got a job in a place called Lewisham, which is southeast, very close to Millwall. So my dad was driving from kind of Middlesex all the way through London. That just became too much. So we moved over to Kent, moved over to a little village called Biggin Hill. And that's basically where I spent my upbringing with my sisters. Went to Charles Darwin School. I started playing football when I was about 7, so not stupidly early. Didn't really get into it until I went to senior school. And then my kind of head of PE took me under his wing a little bit and taught me how to play football, cricket, tennis, athletics, and to a certain extent. And then that was local football until I started playing district in Kent. So county, regional, that kind of thing. And then I got spotted by a Chelsea scout at 15 and went to Chelsea from 15 to 18. Didn't get offered a pro contract by Chelsea. So I was planning on going to university and then got offered a professional contract by Millwall after I went on trial for a week and was a pro there for 7 years.
So when Joe Dolan was kicking the ball around the backyard with his sisters or out on the road with his mates, what jersey was he wearing back then?
He was wearing a Crystal Palace.
Was he? Yeah, Crystal Palace. No wonder you're going for Crystal Palace tomorrow night.
Yeah, they were my local team. So they're kind of South East London, and Kent's that corner. And my next door neighbour but one, and his dad was season ticket holders. Yeah. So I started going with them. It's actually, again, part of a professional sportsman's life. He hasn't got a very happy ending, but Palace and Millwall are obviously massive rivals. So one day when I was playing professionally for Millwall against Crystal Palace, I realised that I didn't support Crystal Palace. Yeah. So I woke up one day and was like, wow, I don't really have a team. It's imagine not
like an empty hole. Yeah.
So I started following Chelsea purely because I'd been there and still knew some of the players and didn't see a clash happening there again. But it was never the same as how I supported Palace.
So we skipped ahead there. We've ended up playing professional football in Millwall. We're going to get to that. Let's take a quick step back. Mum and Dad's names?
Sandra and Joe.
Sandra and Joe. Sisters?
Deirdre and Geraldine.
So Mum and Dad, give me one lesson they taught you, Mum and Dad. What's something Dad taught you in life?
My dad always taught me manners. My dad always taught me to speak when it was time to speak and be quiet and listen when it's time to be quiet and listen. My mum always taught me not to waste anything, especially food. So back then, my mum would only do a monthly shop. You know, the first thing I think about is yogurts and biscuits because that's all I liked, and orange squash. Mm-hmm. But she was like, mate, you can eat it all in the first 2 days if you want. But we're not going to
There'll be nothing left for 28 days.
For 10 months a year, that's what I did. But for 2 months, I'd maybe be able to control myself a bit. But yeah, that was, I don't know where they've come from, but I'd say they're some pretty big messages.
Good messages. You're pretty good at not wasting beer as well as food, so well done. All right, so you mentioned primary school. What was the name of the primary school again?
No, primary was Oaklands.
Oaklands. So, yeah. All right, let's rewind the clock. We're sitting in the classroom in Oaklands. What kind of students, Joe Dolan?
I was kind of like just above middle of the pack. Like I could kind of compete academically was quite good on the field, so that helps when you're trying to find your way in life. Teachers would probably say would speak a little bit too much at the wrong times, maybe a little bit overconfident. But at primary school age, I felt I had a pretty good group of friends. We used to walk to school together, walk home. A bit like he didn't do that much sport at primary school level, so the memories you've got, like we had a football tournament that the final was played at Palace at Selhurst Park Stadium. Like I'll never forget it. Had the weirdest cycling shorts on, like the weirdest colours. Had Osgood slatters in my knees, so I had these mad yellow pads on my knees. But we won the tournament somehow. And yeah, primary school was great.
And then you go to high school. How'd you go A levels wise?
So in the UK, you can finish at the end of year 11, but you can't go to uni, so you have to do 12 and 13 and A levels. The decision was to be made at the end of year 11 was stay at Chelsea and do an apprenticeship, which means no uni, or find a solution. And my mum and dad were both teachers, both maths teachers.
Never knew that.
Yeah, both teachers. So they said, "There's no way you're not giving up. Just you're at Chelsea, yeah, but you ain't going to get a pro contract, son. So you need to prepare for uni." And I was fine with that because I always felt out of my depth at Chelsea anyway. So Monday and Friday, I would go to Chelsea and train and play for the youth team and the reserves and whatever. And then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I'd go to school. So I started 3 A levels, PE, geography, biology. And after 3 months, I dropped one of them. Which one do you reckon I dropped?
You went bile, didn't you? Oh, too much rope learning. Yeah. So you got PE done, GO's done, and the matriculation in the UK is full on. It's a lot of work. So you got those ticked off. You did mention uni, but I'll ask you one question before that. But another question after the uni. So you got into uni when you were playing at Chelsea, or
no, I was applying to go.
Right. So
I basically been told by Chelsea not getting a contract. So my plan then was to go to a decent university, do sports science. But in the meantime, I got offered a trial at Millwall, and they had 10 minutes from Biggin Hill in Bromley. And I went there and trialled for a week, and they offered me a pro contract, so I didn't have to go to uni.
Perfect. At what age is that?
18.
18. All right. We'll ask a question about your childhood. Can you remember your first game of football?
Yeah.
Who was it? Where was it?
I played at the Biggin Hill Rec.
Position?
Centre midfield.
Centre mid.
Against West Wickham.
So we got kind of mum and dad and a dog, or is there a bit of a crowd, or is it under eights?
Been there. My dad would have been there or nearby. Don't think we had the dog then. I think we lost Whiskey. We could never replace Whiskey. Cocker Spaniel, once he was gone, that was it. Big slope on the pitch, long grass, freezing cold. West Wickham in light blue. Oh, I remember that. We were red, white, red. Didn't really know the boys that much. But yeah, played centre midfield. Wasn't great. We lost 2-1, 3-2, something like that. But yeah, I do definitely. That was my first game.
First organised game of football. There wasn't meant to be another question, but I'm intrigued to know the answer to this. Slope downfield, freezing cold, probably a bit of drizzle knowing the UK, muddy pitch. You're probably not in love with football at that point in time. When do you fall in love with the game of football, or you're already there?
No, I think, and I see it on a lot of our boys' faces. I don't think you do love it, but you love being part of something.
Yeah.
You love the kit. Now, how much do our kids love kit?
They do.
You know, they just love looking like each other and then pointing and poking at each other. So I did like it, but there was definitely a period then between, what was that, 7 or 8, 18, where it hurt so much. You couldn't feel your fingers. You couldn't do your boots up. You couldn't take your boots off. My dad used to read the paper, and it would be the Times, so that's big double pages, and he would finish that by the end of the game and put it over the chair so that I'm not covering his car in mud. And, I know one of the biggest messages that my dad ever gave me was based on that. When I got home from football, I'd take my boots off at the door and I'd go straight up the stairs into the bath. And when I'd come downstairs, some days my boots would be clean and some days they'd still be dirty. And that was my dad's way of saying, you can clean your own boots today, or I've cleaned your boots.
On average, out of 10, how many times are the boots cleaned and how many times are they dirty? 2 out of 10, 2 dirty, 8 clean?
I'd go 2 or 3 dirty.
Okay, that's pretty good.
Yeah,
that's good.
So my dad, again, like this, definitely one of the reasons I got as far as I did in football was my dad never coached me. He never wanted to go above whoever was the coach, the teacher, whoever was in charge. He wanted them to be, in charge, whenever I'd look over at the sideline, I'd be like, why is my dad not jumping around and screaming like Vera and Karen and Linda, who are literally up and down screaming? It never bothered me. I just found it weird. But my dad would be walking up and down with a tray and London Pride, Foster's, Guinness, looking after the dads and laughing and joking. But that was how I played football. I played football with my teammates and my coaches, and my dad was always there or thereabouts.
And you fall in love with the game, you start to play organised football. You get to a point where you're good enough to go trial for Chelsea, I guess, in their youth team. Then Millwall comes along. It's one of the oldest, it's one of the most famous football clubs in the country.
Yeah, and just had a very big moment that didn't go our way. But we'll talk about that, I'm sure, at some point. But no, I think when you talk about that falling in love with football, I'd definitely say primary school. I did want to answer that. That tournament at Crystal Palace is probably one of the best memories I've had. And I think by then, if I think, did I love football then? I did.
Yeah.
And I think by then that was moving into secondary school. We were given a lot more freedom then. You could get on a bus and a train and go wherever you wanted. So I was going to watch live football by then. Palace, a bit similar to how they are now, used to go up and down Premier League, League One, Premier League, League One. So we went to Wembley a couple of times for playoff finals. They played Man United in the FA Cup final back in 90 something. So yeah, I was in love with football 12, 13 years old.
Yeah. You're totally in love with it enough to want to make a career out of it?
Well, yeah, I think that came later. I would say that was more year 10, 11 when I realised, because when I went to high school, there was definitely 5 or 6 players better than me. So in year 7, I was by no means the best player. But then in year 8, there was probably 3 players better than me. In year 9, I was looking around going, it's me. And then in year 10, it was clearly me. Without being a dick, sorry, excuse my language, but without that, that was just how I felt confidence and belief. It was coming because of what I could do. And I was just very, very athletic. I could read the game. I could listen to what the coach was asking me to do. So I became effective. And I think that's probably one of the biggest things that you want players to be is effective in a game. And that means stopping goals or scoring goals or creating goals. That's an effective player. So
yeah. I was going to ask you a couple of those questions. You're pretty humble, so I didn't think I was going to ask, were you a standout? Without putting words in your mouth, is probably not as a younger kid, but as you got older, you probably were the better player in the team. Was it nature or nurture? Were you just genetically gifted, or was it a contribution of playing lots of different sports, which you've already mentioned, but being coachable?
Yeah, I think we played a lot of rugby, and actually my
School, club, both.
just school. Really, the club scene back then for us didn't really exist. We had Biggin Hill Juniors, we had school, but school just went term league with different sports activities. Rugby, it's funny, and again, never forget it, but my boss, still call him my boss, but he ended up being the best man at our wedding, which is a bit weird, but we're still best mates now. But he said I was potentially a better rugby player than footballer, but I was just so soft because at that age, everything hurt. I wouldn't get involved in a rugby game until I'd been hurt. And then you almost kind of warm up, if you like. Like I started as a second rower, number 8, and then ended up as a fly half because I just didn't want to get involved in the physical because at that age things hurt. But when it comes to that, the standout kind of section, the next, so that upper age of school, year 10, 11, 12, that was clear. But I think it drifted away at Chelsea. I was never the best at Chelsea. Like they were all technically better than me, played more football than me, had been together. But I could survive from a physical point of view and would keep the game simple. But then I then went to Millwall and they kind of went, wow, this guy can play. Because I'd kind of been forced into that technical upbringing, development at Chelsea, which was hard and had really tough moments. But it meant when I went to Millwall, bang, the confidence came back because all of a sudden I was a standout. But I was born at the end of May, so that was also a bit of a surprise. I was tall and physical and strong, but I was a very late kid in terms because it's September.
It is, yeah. So from the school year.
Yeah, so I was pretty young.
Okay.
For my year group.
All right, and you'd be mid-pack in Australia. It's about right.
Yeah.
So you late bloomer, you grow. I think it's Chelsea. Haney talks about, like, say, crossing the road. Is it Crystal Palace? The success is judged by how many boys cross the road from the youth program. You do cross the road, but it's at a different club. So you are living the dream at that stage?
Yeah, we were lucky that we just had an unbelievable crop, and it's great to be living in this country. I mean, we're all getting older, so less boys remember his name. But Tim Vader was the same age as me, and we were that group. So at the end of that under 18 time slot, lots of boys move clubs because they get released. And to be fair, the bigger clubs, with respect, will let players know earlier to give them a chance to go and get another club because they're good enough. But of course, I go to Millwall and there are plenty of players who want a pro contract as well. And they're like, who's this guy? And Tim wasn't one of those guys. Stephen Reed, who went on to be one of the best professionals that I've ever played with, who played in the Premier League hundreds of times. I remember his face in the changing room. He was cleaning his boots and he was just looking at me. And he hadn't taken his eyes off me while he was polishing his boots. And we always talk about it. And I said, "What were you thinking?" He was like, "Who's this big prick? And what position does he play?" That's all he wanted to know was, what position do I play? Am I going to be a competition to him? And I didn't play up front, which is where he was playing. So, there was a lot of things, a lot of moments I look back on and go, I'm pretty proud I got through them, because you don't really realise what that is, and that's stress and it's anxiety and it's pressure. But I think I always knew it was there. But again, the whole performance aspect of it is where you get your confidence back from, and then people want to be your friend. And that was something that I missed with the Chelsea time. In my first year at Chelsea, on those Mondays and Fridays, everybody was playing really well in the youth team, in the reserves. Everyone had shake your hand. And then in the second year, and again, depends on who listens to this, they moved a certain John Terry from centre midfield to centre back. They said he's going to be a centre back, and that was when I got told I was going to go. And literally overnight, your name's not on any lists. Nobody says hello to you anymore. You haven't got a peg in the bullet room. Nobody said anything to you, but you just know. You're just like, okay, that's it. So yeah, and the funny part of that is I got to a point where I would actually go to school instead of going to Chelsea in that second year, just to walk around and go, I'm at Chelsea, when I knew my time was up. But I was lucky that, again, I was able to get a trial at Mill pretty quickly before that all fell away.
Who set that up?
My boss, John Burtonsville. He knew a dinner lady in the canteen at Millwall. Something as crazy as that. And again, a little funny story that goes along with that. When you sign a pro contract, you do it at the stadium, and your mum and dad are there. And normally, whoever's arranged that deal comes into the background. And I remember seeing that photo and wondering who was the guy that was standing in the back, who obviously got some, I don't know, royalty or whatever the word is, commission for signing me. He was the dinner lady's son or something like that. And she was like, "Oh, yes." So Mark Anderson said, "Oh, I brought Joe Dolan to Millwall." He didn't know anything about me. But I came because my boss knew one of the dinner ladies.
You're joking. No wonder you're so nice to the kitchen staff.
Reminded, do you know what happened a few years after that? It was we were on holiday in Egypt, and you're at the bottom of the pyramids, and you go and take a photo, a selfie, and then a camel comes out of nowhere in the background and goes, "Oh, can we have 100?" And you're like, "What are you talking about? We didn't have it." "Oh, I was in the photo, so now you need to pay me." So it was a little bit like that. So
Wow.
that was the beginning of professional sport.
Okay. I was going to ask that. No manager. It's
Not then.
And then, so let's talk professionalism. Is it match payments? Is there contracts at Millwall at that stage? It's not a wealthy club by any stretch, but did it have some full-time pro players?
Yeah, so at that time we were in League Two.
Yeah.
We were
So
in
League Two, just for the non-Premier League people or English football people, League Two, League One is Championship, or is it League One? Okay, so you've a couple of runs.
third division.
Yeah.
We're skin.
Yeah.
So we're trying to offload players that are on big money, and basically they play youngsters because they want to develop us. We're cheap, and they can sell us on. So Tim obviously moved on to Everton. Reedy moved on to Blackburn. Lucas moved on to Blackburn. There was a few others that stayed at Millwall for a good 5, 6 or 7 years because we got promoted and did really well. But I think what was a real plus was, in that first season that I went to Millwall, they moved the youth team league to under 19. So it meant we all had another year to prove whether we were going to be good enough
in the youth system.
in the youth system.
And then you decide whether you cross the road or not.
Well, at that place, we were all in the same place anyway.
Yeah.
So, but I basically made my debut in that year. So we had an extra year at under 19.
Yeah.
But I made my debut at 18.
Yep.
In the first team.
What was that like?
Unbelievable.
How many people in the crowd?
For that one, I reckon there was about 10,000.
First time in front of a big crowd?
Yeah. So it was a cup semi-final. So there's a lower league cup semi-final. But it's a good opportunity to get to Wembley and make some money.
Yeah.
And two of the defenders, I think, were injured or suspended. And there's no conversation. There's just like, you're with them today. Yeah, just like, okay. So over you go and you train with the first team and then you're like, I'm in the team.
Any jersey presentation? No, just rock up.
Just be there.
So you look about 4.
Yeah.
You're about 4 kilos and 6 foot, whatever you are now, 3, 4. Is it like the old cricket change rooms? Is it like, hey, are you like the 12th man, go get me a beer? Or is it, hey, you're part of us and you're Millwall for life?
Tim, Reedy and I were already in the team by then.
So they're your age, gone in, yeah.
Yeah, so that they're almost looking around going, welcome, but don't stuff up.
Yeah, don't stuff up, totally.
Yeah, it was incredible, like exhilarating. Couldn't wait to tell people I'm playing on Tuesday night.
What was the phone call home like?
Yeah, I can't believe I'm playing. And then, of course, they just keep everything inside and just go, okay, what time's the game? As if they don't know.
Do I have to pay for tickets?
It was up against Gillingham, and their two centre forwards, Bob Taylor, Carla Sava, had scored 30 goals between them.
Your centre mid, centre back. Okay. Jeez.
Yeah.
You stop them.
And we did.
Score?
We won 3-2 in extra time. So
well done.
One of my...
Gillingham always look forward to playing Millwall. They haven't lost to the Lions in their last 7 meetings, but they fell behind after just 11 minutes yesterday. Dennis Wise setting up Paul Eiffel to beat Vince Bartram. The Millwall captain, who's nudging 37, was an inspiration all afternoon. Gillingham was slow out of the block.
So I'm obviously what they call a plastic paddy. That's what the English call me. So I'm not a real paddy because I'm kind of born and raised.
Of course, yeah.
I'm plastic because I played for them and my parents were Irish.
Right.
But we had a couple of Southern Irish boys in the squad. Really actually played for Ireland as well, but was born and bred in Kingston, so he's a plastic paddy as well.
Yeah.
But one of my favourite photos was me and Richard Sadler after that game. He scored the winner. And that meant we were in the area final, which if we won that, we can play it.
Do you stay in the team after that, or is it a bit of up and down?
Yeah, no, there was a bit of up and down. I think I might have played 1 or 2 more, but then I came out. But I got back in again, ironically, for the area final. So I don't think I played the home leg. That was against Walsall. We were a team from like the Birmingham area. I don't think I played the home leg. But I played the away leg, definitely, because I came off the pitch with nothing but my undies because the fans invaded the pitch because we won and got to Wembley. And I literally had my boots and my shin pads and that was it. And that night, Stuart Nethercott said later, who was the captain, said that night Joe Dolan became a footballer. He headed everything. He cleared everything.
What age? How many years? Is that second year?
Still 18.
It's still first year. So you finally step up to being a man.
Well,
wow.
You didn't tell me that for 10 years. But
so how many games do you play in total for Millwall? That's game 1. How many do you play?
67.
So when kids will love that.
Yeah.
But Shane Warne says there's nothing like knowing you're being picked the next week because you start to take more risks. You start to feel comfortable. You know the coach isn't going to come up and go, you let that goal in, you drop. When's Joe Dolan feel like he's getting picked next week? Is it game 5 to 10? Is it game 20? Did you never feel like that at Millwall?
So that season, we got to Wembley, played at Wembley, played terribly.
First time at Wembley?
First time playing at Wembley.
Yeah, wow.
We lost in the last minute to Wigan.
And very little to choose between these two teams. Millwall and Wigan were so close together in the league table, so close together at Wembley too. A late opportunity in the first half for Barlow, who was well shadowed by Jamie Stewart. So half-time at Wembley in the Auto Windscreen Shield final. It's Millwall 0, Wigan 0.
we had 50,000 fans, they had 5. We did a lap of honour having lost. It was horrible. But that year, we didn't make the playoffs. So we wanted to have a big push for the playoffs the following year. So that year was 2000 to 2001. So 99 was my debut, but I was 18 because I wasn't 19 till May. And that's the year we won the league. And I probably played 30 games that year before I broke my leg. And that year was when I was in the team. So I probably scored 3 or 4 goals that year. It was me and Nevers. There were senior players that couldn't get in the team. You know, I was getting stronger. I was playing for Northern Ireland.
Starting to grow. So
Yeah.
you play for the national team or junior?
Under 18s and under 21s.
Wow.
In that year.
So you're playing international level football. You're feeling like you're part of this Millwall side that's going well. The only thing that can stop you is injury. So broken leg.
Yeah, broken leg. February.
First time?
Yeah, February 2001.
This isn't the break that bones out.
The main
That's the main one. But yeah, luckily we're not videoing, but you see the scar on Joe's leg, bones hanging out, surgery, skin grafts. Do you feel like you ever got back to that guy that was
I never did.
never?
But I never did for a couple of reasons. One, I hadn't stopped growing.
Yeah.
So I actually got bigger physically than I was before I broke my leg. And you only have to be different to not be good enough. And that kind of happened. But the reality was I didn't actually get back in the first team until I'd ruptured my ACL. So that injury, you know, I got called up to the Northern Irish first team with a fax, lying in hospital with a broken leg. So I potentially would have made a first team, but never got back. So I broke my leg in February. So that was me. The season only had a couple of months left.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So what the plan then is, okay, well, you'll be ready for next season. Maybe not the start, but you'll be ready.
Yeah.
So then aimed for that, went on pre-season tour to Germany, had some complications with my break. My big toe tendon wasn't working, so I couldn't run properly. So I had to have an operation on that. Came back from that and actually felt amazing and felt like I was going to get back. I was back training with the first team and then went to turn and run in the channel and my cruciate went in my right knee.